What's up, Vetters? Patrick here with Vetted. Today, we are talking about this.
And so what was the point of MKUltra?
Who knows? I don't know.
You don't know?
I think the initial aim was to figure out the perfect truth serum. I have access to the documents that survived the destruction order, and it was called Super Spy, because they're not public record.
Thank you.
I went to this guy's house, talked to a family member. These were like old stuff that survived the CIA's destruction order of all of this stuff. Focus, authority, tribe, and emotion. And if you get that, you get compliance. And if you get that plus hypnosis, then you can create the Manchurian candidate. I have a conversation with Shawn. I have a conversation with Stephen. And by the third or fourth session, you are fully living your life as if there are two people in your head.
You got it.
Please stop this. I don't know anything.
All right, Vetters, please hit that like button. That really helps out the videos. And of course, if you're not already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. All right, so what is this video about? Well, a person that goes by the name Chase Hughes recently went on Shawn Ryan's podcast, and he talked about MKUltra. And in today's video, we're going to be not diving deep, but we're not diving shallow either, into MKUltra and some of its history. And I learned some things about MKUltra that I had no idea about. So you'll be learning some new things about MKUltra, and more importantly, a sort of bombshell that Chase Hughes dropped, that he has access to some files that have never been released to the public before. But before we get started on all of this, how about a quick little history of exactly what MKUltra is?
The story begins here, just off the nation's front yard, the Mall. The buildings behind me were the headquarters for the World War II Office of Strategic Services. It was here that the first halting steps toward mind control began.
In the shadow of the Cold War, the CIA launched Project MKUltra in 1953, a covert illegal program to master mind control and unbreakable interrogation.
We are not professing to tell you the complete story of these activities. We are professing to tell you the complete story that we know. Right. But these records that we've uncovered don't tell the story. They tell pieces of it.
Fearing Soviet brainwashing techniques, director Alan Dulles greenlit chemist Sidney Gottlieb to orchestrate it, funneling millions into over 150 sub-projects across universities, hospitals, and prisons.
Just...
One intelligence agency tried to peel this man's mind back to reveal its deepest secrets.
I'll live through it. I'll live through it.
This man worked on some of these programs. He would write of his work, "It was fun, fun, fun."
Unwitting Americans and Canadians became guinea pigs, dosed with LSD in secret tests, subjected to hypnosis, electroshock, sensory deprivation, and even forced sexual encounters under Operation Midnight Climax.
His ultimate goal was mind control and to create the perfect spy, all through the use of chemicals, radiation, drugs, hypnosis, electric shock, isolation in tubs of water, sleep deprivation, brainwashing, verbal, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse.
Tragically, it claimed lives, like CIA scientist Frank Olson, who plummeted from a hotel window after unwitting LSD exposure in 1953.
Subject today concerns CIA's involvement in the development of bacteriological warfare materials with the Army's Biological Laboratory at Fort Detrick, CIA's retention of an amount of shellfish toxin, and CIA's use and investigation of various chemicals and drugs.
By 1973, Gottlieb ordered most records shredded, but leaks surfaced in 1975 via Frank Church and the Church Committee hearings, exposing the horrors for the first time.
No one has interviewed Gottlieb as to why he destroyed the material or what they contain, the records.
No, we have not interviewed him as to the reason.
You know what documents he destroyed?
We're very unsure as to the total. We do not have an inventory of them.
MKUltra's legacy? A stark warning on unchecked power, fueling distrust in intelligence agencies, and inspiring conspiracy lore.
Moreover, the record seems to support the notion that it was only by chance that the leadership of the CIA became aware some years later of even the existence of these lethal toxins, which were in violation of a direct presidential order. In short, the record's a mess, and we may never know just exactly what happened.
From the Manchurian Candidate to modern ethics debates in neuroscience, it officially ended in 1973, but its ethical scars endure. And some say it never ended.
I'm Chris DiNicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. My parents were divorced around 1966, and Donald Richard Ebner, my natural father, was involved with Dr. Green in the experiments. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976.
All right, y'all. So clearly there's some just messed up stuff here with MKUltra, and we're going to dive into as much of it as we can. And again, I am going to show you some things you may not have heard about this that I found sort of researching this. But first thing we're going to do is I'm not going to bury the lead, okay? Chase Hughes, who is part of a YouTube channel called The Behavioral Panel, amongst other things, he's been on all the big podcasts and talked about a lot of the same stuff. But one thing in particular he hasn't talked about are these files that he said he came across that weren't destroyed as part of the MKUltra, project, right? So two parts here. First, let me show you some old footage here from the 1975 church hearings, okay, where they talk about these files that were destroyed, specifically by a man named Sidney Gottlieb, who started this whole thing initially, right? And he went and destroyed all these files, shredded them, but then, according to Chase, he found some.
No one has interviewed Gottlieb as to why he destroyed the material or what they contain, the records.
No, we have not interviewed him as to the reason.
You know what documents he destroyed?
We're very unsure as to the total. We do not have an inventory of them.
Do you think they might have said who it was authorized the formulation or the retention of this stuff? Do you have any reason to think it might or might not contain that information?
In this case, I doubt that it would have very much, because this case indicates, from the evidence we have at hand.
Does it say anything, have any reason to think that it might say how, if at all, this material was used in an aggressive way against someone to kill someone?
Well, there may well be some of that.
When was the documentation destroyed?
In 1973.
It didn't happen to be destroyed at the same time those tapes.
1972. 1972.
1972. When in 1972?
In November, I believe it was.
In November of 72. Do you have any idea what volume of records were destroyed?
I do not know.
You know who authorized the destruction, if anyone?
As I said, there was a memorandum of agreement between the director and Mr. Gottlieb at that time.
And the director at that time was?
Mr. Helm.
So, all right. So let's hear from Chase about what files exactly he found. And he's going to mention that he is going to provide those files, right, for everyone to take a look at, because they're not public and have never been seen before.
I have access to the documents that survived the destruction order, and it was called Super Spy. And do you do show notes? Like the PDF in the comment or PDF in the description thing?
Mm-mm.
Shit. I would have sent it to you so people can download it. But
oh, we'll do it. We'll do it.
Okay.
We've done it before. I thought you meant yeah,
okay.
We'll do it.
Yeah, so I'll send it to you so people can actually look at these, because they're not public record.
Thank you.
I went to this guy's house, talked to a family member. These were like old stuff that survived the CIA's destruction order of all of this stuff.
Well, I actually went and checked the description of the clip that Shawn Ryan has on his show and the full interview, and there is no PDF or any files in the show notes for us to see these. So they talk about it in the show. They say that they're gonna, release them and all this, and they're not there. So I don't know what's going on there. Shawn Ryan, please put those files out. Chase Hughes, you said you were going to. I don't know. That seems a little weird for them not to follow up on this, to be honest with you, and they left it in the show. So they said they were going to provide these documents, and they didn't. So I'm sorry, y'all. They're just not there. And if for some reason I'm wrong, put a link down below to them. Somebody, I'll pin it to the top. Now let's move on to diving a little bit further into MKUltra, because Chase does have a lot of knowledge on this, although didn't provide these documents. That would have been great, but whatever, we'll move on from that. Let's just start exploring MKUltra a little bit more, because again, the well is really deep and dark and disturbing.
And we had like Project Stargate, like the Men Who Stare at Goats movie, and remote viewing and all this other stuff was going on. Then they started MKUltra, which involved a lot of former Nazi scientists and involved a lot of LSD and dosing people with massive, massive doses of LSD and ruining a lot of people's lives in the process. But it was an attempt initially to find some kind of a truth serum. And actually the Navy participated in the biggest one, which was called Project Chatter, which is a sub-project of MKUltra.
Chase is right. There was, as I mentioned before, there's over 150 sub-projects of MKUltra. And the truth is, the more you look into MKUltra, there's many other names for it. It got split up at this, at that. Take a look at this. In 1964, MK Search was the name given to the continuation of the MKUltra program. The MK Search program was divided into two projects, dubbed MK Often and MK Chickwit. Funding for MK Search commenced in 1965 and ended in 1971. But as we all know, this continued on. Under what names, I don't know. And even when they said all of this ended and they had the church hearings in 1975, there's still people that came out in Senate hearings in the mid-90s that were claiming they were experimented on well into the 70s, past when this allegedly stopped. It's possible that this is still going on to this day, in fact. I've put together two witness testimonies from this mid-90s Senate hearing where these two ladies, detail a little bit about their experience of being experimented on it. And my God, is this disturbing.
Between the years of 1957 and 1984, I became a pawn in a government scheme whose ultimate goal was mind control and to create the perfect spy, all through the use of chemicals, radiation, drugs, hypnosis, electric shock, isolation in tubs of water, sleep deprivation, brainwashing, verbal, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. I was exploited unwittingly for nearly 3 decades of my life, and the only explanations given to me were that, quote, the end justifies the means, and, quote, I was serving my country in their bold effort to fight communism. I can only summarize my circumstances by saying they took an already abused 7-year-old child and compounded my suffering beyond belief. The saddest part is, I know for a fact that I was not alone.
I'm Chris DiNicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. My parents were divorced around 1966, and Donald Richard Ebner, my natural father, was involved with Dr. Green in the experiments. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976. Dr. Green performed radiation experiments on me in 1970, focusing on my neck, throat, and chest, 1972 focusing on my chest, and my uterus in 1975. Each time I became dizzy, nauseous, and threw up. All these experiments were performed on me in conjunction with mind control techniques and drugs in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Green was using me mostly as a mind control subject from 1966 to 1973. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin.
Now, another one of these sub-projects that I did mention before was something called Operation Midnight Climax, which is, you know, what the hell? Who's coming up with these names?
And they did this one project called Project Midnight Climax. Have you heard of this?
Mm-mm.
They took prostitutes in San Francisco, and these women would lure these men back to the hotel and drug them with LSD, like high-dose LSD. And on the other side of a two-way mirror, these scientists would be back there writing down God knows what, because that's all we really know about the whole program. But they were also experimenting with aerosol LSD. Like, can we disperse it into a crowd? Can we disperse it over a city? What does it do in water supplies? And just some insane stuff. But they discovered this way to create a Manchurian candidate. And this is a lot of where some of these ideas came from. And this guy, George Estabrooks, perfected, or back then had it perfected, this system to create a Manchurian candidate, to where he could create an alter ego inside of an Army officer. One of them was the normal officer, and they called him Jones A, and there was a Jones B. And we could send this guy through enemy lines, doing whatever. Jones A is a normal Army officer. Jones B is carrying these vital classified secrets, radio frequencies, whatever it is. I made that last part up, the frequency part up. Who knows what he's carrying? So if Jones A gets captured, Jones B doesn't activate until he hears a very specific hypnotic phrase or hypnotic command under hypnosis. And they do that on the other side of the line. So they developed this stuff way back when.
And again, like I said, this doesn't stop here. There's so much to MKUltra when you start looking into it, and where it started, why it started, how far back it goes. There's an interesting clip with Joe Rogan talking with this woman who's very knowledgeable on the subject, and she kind of lays out what was the whole point of MKUltra to begin with.
What do you think was the initial motivation to sort of pursue mind control studies, the federal government?
Yeah. I think the initial motivation was a kind of national internal emergency, national security emergency that emerged right after World War II, actually at the beginning of the Korean War, when U.S. pilots were coming back or were shown confessing to having flown germ warfare missions over China, and then many POWs were coming back and seemed to have been converted to communism or have been concerningly affected by something that was seen as brainwashing. So many of the soldiers coming back seem to have been brainwashed or have collaborated to some degree when they were held as prisoners. And then there were 21 U.S. POWs who elected to stay in China, and this really was a disturbing. They all had a chance to choose when they were in the UN camps after they'd been held prisoner for 4 years or so, and 21 of them decided that they'd like to try their lot in China, and so this caused this kind of collective caused a crisis of did the communists possess a super weapon of some kind that no other war. There was even a famous article in the New Yorker that said something new in history, that there was some capacity that this ideological system had, the communists had, that was somehow rendering Americans powerless against it. So this was kind of the crisis of mind control, and MKUltra was an attempt to basically reverse engineer what this was.
I mean, that's a disturbing, scenario, right? It's almost like, well, maybe the intention started good, but you know, once you get people involved and they got a little power and they're compartmentalized, right, separated, they just start running off the rails and doing their own thing. And it's fascinating, but also, again, just very disturbing.
And one of the doctors working on this whole project was named Dr. Joylyn West, who may have been involved with the Sirhan situation and Bobby Kennedy, and which is a whole nother rabbit hole. But it looks like Sirhan to me. I'm 100% convinced that he was programmed to do that.
No shit.
It's not hard to do. I mean, look at the Milgram experiment. 40 minutes, kill a stranger, and they didn't use hypnosis. There was no like cool sales tactic or script that they had to follow. Everybody's concerned with like, what do I say? What are the exact words I need to say? It's, can you trigger the fate model? Focus, authority, tribe, and emotion. And if you get that, you get compliance. And if you get that plus hypnosis, then you can create the Manchurian Candidate. And it's not that hard to do. You don't need a bunch of advanced training to get that done.
And this whole thing about this Manchurian Candidate, right? Like, this is absolutely insanity.
Raymond?
Yes, sir.
Can you see the Red Queen?
Yes, sir.
And Chase Hughes, is being someone that does hypnotism and kind of deals with some of this stuff, kind of explains the process, right? And it's very confusing how you can basically split someone's personality to have two different people, and you can activate one over the other, right? So you just have your normal person, Patrick, as I go through life, and then boom, I can be Fred, secret assassin, on the other end. And that, honestly, the way Chase describes it, it's not that difficult to do.
So how would they do it with MKUltra? Would it be they are in the middle of the journey, you know, the psychedelic kicks in, and then is it a hypnosis? I mean, because the way it's described is they're injecting thoughts, right?
Yeah, so it probably, there was never a recipe. My estimation is that it was a microdose of LSD, because as you know, in psychedelics, language loses more and more meaning the more psychedelics you do. So I was thinking it was a microdose of LSD, massive amounts of hypnosis to where the person's hyper responsive to that person's voice. So like when I see clients, they listen to my MP3 audio thing that's hypnosis to just help them go to sleep every night. So by the time they show up and see me in person, their brain is hyper responsive to my voice, and it's a lot easier. And then during that process, in my estimation, they used real trauma, like oxygen deprivation or something like that, to create a traumatic brain response inside of the limbic system of our brain, which makes us dissociate. And during this process of dissociation is when they put that second dissociated person, or part of them, or I don't know what the words to say, but they're dissociated. So while they're dissociated, they hypnotize them and then kind of create that alter ego. Tell them how they activate, tell them when they come up, and what their personality is, what they like to do. You're here to protect the host. So like, if I did this to you, Sean B's job would be to protect Sean A.
I mean, all of this is disturbing if you think about it. Like, how many people are out there just waiting to be activated to do some shady shit, right? Pardon my French. It's like, I don't know. Again, this is insanity.
I don't understand how person B comes out, though. You know what I mean? How is that determined?
Person B comes out through dissociation. So that's where we get the name dissociative identity disorder. So when a person is going through some kind of traumatic event, you'll talk to somebody, I think you had someone on your show who mentioned this, who goes through trauma and they just kind of like exit their body temporarily, or exit this one globe of consciousness into this other piece. And when they shift over to this other piece, you can separately create this piece and give them an identity, give them a name. And if I can make something real in your head, then I can create it in reality for you. which is why a lot of these cases of dissociative identity disorder were created by the psychiatrists in the 70s and 80s and the 90s. Because, and this is called iatrogenic dissociative identity disorder. So if you came to me, I keep using you as the example, but there's nobody else here. Shawn, if you came to me and I was a psychiatrist and we were working together, you said, well, I have this thing going on in my life and it's X and Y and Z. And all I did was start talking about two different parts of you. And I say, it seems like there's a part of you that wants to eat the right thing, but there's also a part of you that wants to overeat. And you're like, yeah. And then I'd go into 5 or 6 other examples in your life. Is this like this in social situations? Is there a part of you that wants to hide and there's a part of you that wants to socialize? Yeah. So I'd go into all these parts. And then I would say, you know what, I'd like you to take a questionnaire. And this questionnaire is maybe 17 questions. And a lot of these people made it up on the spot, these little questionnaires. And if I tell you that you scored high in dissociative identity, I'd say, like, this person, this other part of you has their own thoughts, their own behaviors, their own life. And I think a lot of your issues are from not addressing this other part of you that wants to do these other things. And they're probably here to keep you safe. So just really quick, just between you and I, if that other part of you had a name, what would you want to name that other part? And you say, Stephen. And I'm like, all right, so I'd like to talk to Stephen now. So within the course of one session, I have a conversation with Shawn, I have a conversation with Stephen. And by the 3rd or 4th session, you are fully living your life as if there are 2 people in your head.
You gotta.
And honestly, when you look at like some of the things that they did, right, it's so disturbing. And a lot of this stuff has just come out, you know, after the fact, right? Even after these church hearings that happened in 1975. You know, BBC did this great little sort of documentary and looking back at some of these people and their children of like what happened to some of these people, and the stories you hear are disturbing.
I was given a glass of Kool-Aid, and so were the other children. This Kool-Aid was spiked with LSD. It was horrible.
The CIA knew that it was breaking, you know, every moral, ethical, and legal law in the books to do these experiments.
They all were behind it. They all knew what they were doing, but they weren't doing it out of care or love. They were doing it out of military and political reasons.
I am on medication now because of what happened to me when I was 16. I have not had any compensation or apology. I want everyone to know in Canada what went on in that horrible, horrible hospital.
And look, this didn't just happen in America. This also happened in Canada. Take a look at this. The CIA exported experiments to Canada when they recruited Scottish psychiatrist Donald Ewan Cameron, creator of the psychic driving concept, which the CIA found interesting. Interesting is an interesting word to use because the stories that come from that are absolutely bonkers.
My father was a victim of Dr. Cameron. He was a 27-year-old healthy skier, canoeer, very athletic, and he had asthma. They told him if he went to the Allen Memorial, they could cure his asthma.
My father, Charles, was a patient of Dr. Cameron's. He had a trigeminal neuralgia, it's called, where there's a pain in the temple that radiates into the jaw that apparently is excruciatingly painful. They told him that it was psychosomatic, which it's not, but in those days, what did they know? So they sent him to a shrink. This shrink that he went to was working with Cameron, although we didn't know. So he put my father right into the program.
I was having trouble with my parents. My father and my stepmother decided to put me in the Allen Memorial Institute. They had no idea what went on in there. I was 16 when I was there.
Dr. Cameron pursued a concept he called depatterning, which was meant to reduce patients to an infantile psychological state wherein doctors could take advantage of the person's cognitive vulnerability to attempt to rebuild their mind under the doctor's control.
And honestly, like, even one of the doctors, came out after the fact to talk about some of this stuff. And this is an old clip, okay, of this doctor talking for the very first time about this mind control and the drugs and all of this. Again, it was all allegedly, a good venture, right, to help America, but we were experimenting on our own citizens. That's not good. And that's not good for America.
The discovery was lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. The film that you see is considered by many experts to be the closest illustration of the effects of a hallucinogenic.
It was one of the first times that anybody had run into a powerful drug that was different than anything else that they knew anything about.
John Gittinger, recently retired chief psychologist for the CIA. This is the first time Gittinger has been interviewed publicly.
We could disable a whole city by putting a very small amount on a water supply. After all of these years of us, those of us who involved in looking for this secret drug, this was the only thing that began to look for the first time like it might be something like that.
And of course, you may be wondering, like, why didn't the press come out with this? Why didn't the press talk about this much more? I mean, they did a little, but when you find out something that was uncovered during these same church hearings, you find out that the media was absolutely infiltrated by the CIA reporters who were CIA agents, right? And it's readily admitted. Take a look at this old clip here, okay, from the 70s. This is insane.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to the national news services, AP and UPI?
Well, again, I think we're getting into the kind of detail, Mr. Chairman, that I'd prefer to handle in executive session.
Senator, do you think that you named the news organizations in your final report?
That remains to be decided. I think it was entirely in order for our correspondents at that time to make use of CIA agent chiefs of station and other members of the executive staff of CIA as sources of information which were useful in their assessments of world conditions.
Would you say that continues today?
Well, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations of the period of the 1970s, it seems to me that a reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
And at the end of the day, the truth is, we're never going to know the full truth of everything that happened, because this was decades long, experiments and operations and secret projects, right? And I'm not saying that America is all to blame, but they lit the match. They gave a certain, agency power, and the people that they then gave power just ran with it and went crazy, right? Again, all for the good of America, but we're never going to know. we're never going to shine a light on all the dark spots in this story. And that's kind of a shame, because at the end of the day, this is what they said in 1977. Given the CIA's purposeful destruction of most records, its failure to follow informed consent protocols with thousands of participants, the uncontrolled nature of the experiments, and the lack of follow-up data, the full impact of MKUltra experiments, including deaths, may never be known. The truth is, we'll never know. One thing in particular that's kind of fascinating is that Sopranos creator, the hit TV show Sopranos, right? That guy's making a brand new show about MKUltra, and that actually may shine a light, and we may get more information because of it, right? Just because people will be thinking about it, watching it, searching, wanting to find out more, and that could possibly open a floodgate of information.
About David Chase, creator, working on a new thriller series for HBO. It's called Project MKUltra. Okay. It'll be a limited series, and it centers around a real-life chemist and spy master, Sidney Gottlieb, who headed the CIA's psychedelic program during the Cold War. Oh. How about that for a setup for a series?
And you say, Patrick, it's just a TV show. Nothing's going to happen. All right, but it's not just anybody making a TV show, and it will get a lot of attention, and maybe not the way we want, but it could, crack a can open of more info. Who knows? But looking into the story, I just found it very disturbing. And I hope the people that were victims of this find peace, and their families find peace. And, there should be some sort of reparations or something for these people. And again, we don't even know the extent of who's involved and how many people were affected. You have people claiming to be part of MKUltra who weren't, right? So that adds to the nonsense as well. People coming out, I was part of it, experiments too. No, you weren't, right? So, those people are the worst, right? You're going to sort of lie about your trauma to sort of attach yourself to the story of people with real trauma, right? Think of it like a soldier who goes to battle and comes back and tells you stories of trauma and this and that, and I was shot at, making it all up. Totally taking away from soldiers who actually go into battle, who actually risk their lives, who actually see their fellow, soldiers go down, lose their lives, whatever. It's kind of disgusting. It's like, and that is happening. There's so many people out there claiming to be victims of this who are not, but there are real victims of this. That is true. And having to parse through that, it just makes it even more difficult. So do me a favor. Don't lie about your trauma, right? You've probably got real trauma. Just focus on that. There's no need to lie about something that didn't happen to you, right? Trust me, people can see through it. They may not tell you to your face. They may go, oh yeah, okay, yeah. But they know, right? They know. And you can tell when someone's been through real trauma, right? It's pretty obvious. So for any of you out there that are lying about it, stop.
And so what was the point of MKUltra?
Who knows? I don't know.
You don't know?
I think the initial aim was to figure out the perfect truth serum, which they thought LSD was some miracle for truth serum. And they were testing sodium amytal, which is another drug that's pretty well known as a good truth serum. And they were trying to figure out, can we really brainwash people? Can we create Manchurian candidates? Can we split people's personalities? There was so much that it was just wild. It was the Wild West. So it's just looking at what they did, nobody would ever be able to know what the ultimate aim was.
So how would they get personality B to trigger on demand? I mean, if they were going to have a Manchurian candidate or, an assassin or, any bad actors. I mean, how would they trigger personality B to carry out whatever the mission is?
It's pretty simple. A lot of repetition. So like if I continually deprive you of oxygen, and then afterwards, every time you dissociate them, say, now I'm talking to Shawn B. And what's your number one goal? You want to protect Shawn A, right? And the number one way to do that is to go do this one thing in this place. That's the way to protect. Is that your goal? Is that what you want to do? Good. And every time you come out, I might set up some kind of a trigger. Once you hear these words, then you have permission to come out and do exactly what you want to do.
All right, veterans, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I put a lot of work and effort into this. This took a lot longer than I thought. I was initially just going to react to a couple of clips from Chase Hughes, and next thing you know, I'm putting this whole thing together. Meanwhile, this other stuff's happening in the UFO community that I'm not covering, but I'll get to it all. This felt very personal to me to cover this because there are real victims here, right? Real victims who are affected by this. And I hope one day again, they all find peace. All right, betters, we'll see you in the next one. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace!
So, I experienced a UAP back in 2003. I was with friends, staying at my friend's family's cabin up in the Poconos of Pennsylvania near the Emerald Lakes when we left the house that we were staying at. Me and my friend at the time left while his parents were sleeping to explore the surrounding area, and it was probably around 1:45 a.m. at night. We hear a faint swooshing sound in the distance, so we looked up. It was a clear sky, and we don't know how to describe it, but it was a large black, blackest black, you could think of midnight black, triangle in the sky overhead. It silently floated overhead. We could not make out any symbols, but the material underneath of the object was almost like a satin material. It looked like a fabric almost. There were orange faint lights on each corner and a large amber colored light in the center protruding from the object. It floated overhead. We could see the sky, like all the stars blacken out in the background as this object floated overhead. And I've never told the story till this day, because honestly nobody believed me when I couldn't even comprehend it myself. Anyway, this happened nearly over 22 years ago, and found it very interesting. Found some corresponding reports on this sighting as well. I can send this over if you're interested. Feel free to reach out. I can send my contact information if you're interested. But thank you for your time.